Hello, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and welcome to our Friday live chat with McDuff and Marcia with our special guest, David Cranmer, Underdown. And thanks for joining us. And if you have any comments or questions, please post them in the chat. I will monitor the YouTube chat, but the main chat to be in is the Rumble chat, and that is Rumble channel McDuff Lives, all one word. So join us there if you are inclined to participate in the chat. It's often very lively. And with that aside, welcome back to the show, David Cranmer Underdown and Marcia Keith.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. Good to see you too, David.
I'm happy to be back. Just 1 week off, so it's nice to be back again.
And we have Polly saying good afternoon. And Polly, how are you? And it's afternoon where she is because she's in the Netherlands, I believe.
Ah,
I hope I'm right. Anyway, thanks for checking in. And again, if you have a comment, put it in the Rumble channel, McDuff Lives, and we'll see it, and maybe we'll actually find an answer for you. If not, we'll have fun talking about it.
there you go.
Okay, until then, let's check in with Marcia and David. What you guys got on your minds?
David, I'll defer to you.
Well, David, you sent me a note about my most recent show, which was the show about the secret team behind the Iran-Contra affair. And you made some connections for me, and I do appreciate that. Of course, I'm following them all up, as I always do. When you find anything that connects to the principal characters in the Saxa story, and certainly General Maxwell Taylor is one of those principal characters who I've been learning more and more about, and it's kind of really horrifying to see the role that he played in my father's life. But anyway, since you were kind enough to send me some connections to, I think, was it? Well, you tell me. It was one of the big corporations.
Well, it was your series has been great. I love the secret team story, and one of the big takeaways that I got from your show was that Prouty described it as William Casey's secret team, which I thought was interesting because Casey goes back all the way to the Point Four system that was set up by Clark Clifford under Truman. That was one of the forerunners of the USAID program. And then Clifford, at the end of his career, is at the BCCI Bank, if people remember. He's part of the BCCI bank scandal in the 80s. So that was a very interesting connection because Casey is, of course, in the meat of the Iran-Contra affair as CIA director. He's Reagan's campaign chairman. So the October surprise is all intriguing with him and the Iran hostages. But what I sent you was actually a personal connection about General Douglas MacArthur that you referenced a lot, and it's a little bit of a personal connection, but to me these things are really important. So basically, what happened was Delphine Dodge, who was the daughter of Horace Dodge, she married a man whose last name was Cromwell. Which always intrigues with the Sullivan and Cromwell, but Cromwell's sister was married to Douglas MacArthur. That was his first wife, and he divorced Delphine Dodge, and then he later married Doris Duke.
Who married Doris Duke?
Cromwell.
Okay, so Cromwell divorced
Delphine Dodge.
Delphine Dodge, and Delphine is the namesake of the famous yacht, right?
Exactly, and that's why it's so important, because Admiral Ernest King, when he becomes the commander of the Navy in World War II, he uses that as his flagship, and his confidential intelligence officer is none other than Richard Byrd, who is the close friend of Edsel Ford. And Edsel Ford is, of course, the one that sponsored the Josephine Ford, which was the the flight that Byrd took to Antarctica, which Prouty, your author, is visiting on the day of the death of JFK. So that's why that's why I think it's really important. And then on a personal note for me, the reason that story touches me so much is because the Delphine Dodge, what used to be moored before it was, used in World War II, it was moored in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, on Lake St. Clair, in front of the Rose Terrace, which is the name of the mansion that Horace Dodge built. And he, when he died, and people may not remember that story, but Horace and his brother both died during World War I of the Spanish flu, and then the assets of the Dodge Motor Company were acquired by the Dillon Reed Bank, which of course.
Can I stop you? I
Yeah.
mean, I put when I put number of little footnotes in my head, and I want to ask about this and this and this and this, but this one I really got to stop you. You saying both of the Dodge brothers died of the Spanish flu?
They both died mysteriously in, I think, 1917 and 1918. And they were they had the beef with Henry Ford from the first incarnation of Ford Motor Company, when Ford went bankrupt because they couldn't pay the Dodge brothers, their top vendor. And then when they reincorporated it, they gave the Dodge brothers 10% of the new Ford Motor Company. And then later, Henry Ford bought them out. In the teens, they started Dodge Brothers and made trucks for World War I. Both Dodge brothers died. And then you had the two wealthiest widows in the world. And they were like the Walton, the Sam Walton Walmart girls. They were the richest women in the world. And, their auto assets went to Chrysler eventually, because Dillon Reed held it. And then Chrysler was created out of the Dodge assets. But all the Fords and Chrysler and all this stuff, they're all related. And so these Dodge brothers lived in this Rose Terrace mansion, which was later demolished. And it was one of the most expensive homes built in the United States. And the people that led the demolishing of it was my Uncle Bill's father-in-law and his stepfather-in-law were the ones that demolished Rose Terrace. So that's why that's always so intriguing, because that's the uncle that married the Jerome. He was married to Aunt Shirley Jerome, who's related to Churchill, and all the old Leonard Jerome and Madison Square Park and all that stuff. So that was where that came in. Why it's so, all of those intrigues, because then what you brought up with the with King, using this Delphine yacht as his flagship, because you talk often about Douglas MacArthur having the Nashville be his flagship, and your father being a young officer in the Navy working. I see your dad as a superstar coming out of a top school, going to Harvard, being a great athlete, a great, prospect, being, positioned with MacArthur as, the future of our leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that another character that is right there with him that intrigues later is named, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to blank on his name. He's the Bechtel.
Oh, you're talking about George P. Schultz?
Not Schultz. It's it's Cap the Knife.
Weinberger.
Weinberger.
Right.
Weinberger.
You mentioned Weinberger.
Yeah.
Weinberger was the head of MacArthur's naval intelligence, or Army intelligence, I believe.
Yeah.
And your father was in the Navy. So that's another intrigue that the research community should build off of, is the fact that, following your dad's career and what he did from that point, and then looking at someone like a Weinberger, who goes on to, be in the health, education, and welfare department that becomes HHS later. he's in there, and then he gets into, with the Reagan administration, he's one of the Iran-Contra characters. So, and as you mentioned, he also has the Bechtel connection. So that's so that's why, you doing these readings and really getting into these characters is so interesting for me, because the Ford Foundation's right there with the Rockefeller and Carnegie, as far as being involved in, creating organizations that are, used for all different kinds of purposes, including the focal point system that described, that Alan Dulles, is known for.
Yeah, a lever to pull in any agency or department or company or foreign government anywhere in the world. Just pick up the phone or buzz the buzzer, and people will stand up and salute and do what you say. That's the secret team that's been built and has never been stopped. And the secret team, has been. If you read Fletcher Prouty, if you read this book, The Secret Team, and compare that to what we're looking at today, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, we're still on. They have kept expanding, and it's NATO. It's the people behind Joe Biden and the people behind President Trump. Because this whole charade of a two-party democracy is so useful to them. It makes us fight each other instead of looking upwards
Exactly.
to the real problem, which is where the real power behind the secret team lives. Because the secret team itself is they're just agents of a higher authority in the pyramid, and when they're no longer useful, they're disposed of as well. So it's no great thing to be part of the secret team. Believe me, I've read enough about this stuff, and again, well, it's my dad's story, and we keep learning more and more. So, and thank you again for all of your research and help, my friend.
Well, I'm, like I immediately was interested in the story, and I think that it should be studied, and I do think there are people looking at it, as you said, and George Webb has talked about it regularly, about how he feels like the documentation around your father's career should be declassified and studied, and have a open. I think the open source is the way to go always, but just release everything and then let different groups sort of compete with each other and work together, and just have gamify it, I guess, to come up with the best way to organize the information so that people can understand it.
Sounds like an interesting project.
Yep.
Marcia, let's toss this one at you, because I'm interested in how you would answer this question. Who does the secret team answer to?
Oh, I'm not even going to try that one.
Oh, come on.
No,
Give
no.
us your gut feeling. Who's pulling the puppet strings?
Do you remember the cigarette smoking man in the X-Files?
No.
Oh, okay, you weren't an X-Files watcher, were you?
No, I saw a few of the last ones.
Yeah. Well, I think the cigarette smoking man was the one who he represented, whoever that is.
All right. Any other guesses? Well, if you're listening, why don't you put your guess up in the chat room? David, what's your guess?
Well, to follow on to that, I think in the movie The Usual Suspects, I feel like the Kaiser Sose character is also another good secret team model of somebody that really can play two different roles very convincingly. But for me, I always look at the banking connections, and I really think for me, I see the Warburgs and Eugene Mayer as being the real power. Lazard Frere, takes over the Rockefeller, their offices in the Rockefeller Center. So I look at them. I mean, the modern version of that now is characters like Antony Blinken, whose dad Donald was a founder of Warburg Pincus, and then Tim Geithner, who's currently running Warburg Pincus, and of course his dad is the one that hired Obama's mom at Ford Foundation to give the micro loans in Indonesia. That was Tim Geithner's mom, and his family has an old Ford Motor and Ford Foundation history. So I look at them, and then and then a lot of the power I see coming out of the Manhattan Project, also the MIT Rad Lab people. That's where Trump, I think, comes out of. His uncle John Trump, who was working for Henry Stimson and the different the founder of the Rad Lab, who's Alfred Lee Loomis. He was his assistant. He was kind of the liaison between the Tizard project, which was the radar project that the English and the Americans were doing as part of the Quebec Agreement. So I see that is where Trump comes from, also out of that sort of MIT National Defense Research Committee that becomes sort of the National Science Foundation later.
You mentioned your first candidate, though, was the Warburgs, and I don't hear much about them anymore, but it's interesting that you do. And of course, I've heard the name Warburg Pincus, but I never thought of it as, like, oh, that's the Warburgs. But of course, the Warburgs were made famous by Little Orphan Annie and with the character Daddy Warbucks. That was a long, long time ago. Yeah. Where do we find, if I wanted to see, okay, where are these Warburgs now? Where is their money? Give us a little bit more, if you would.
Well, my suspicion is that it's Bank of International Settlements. So when they did the Young Plan in 31, which was Owen Young, who was from RCA and General Electric, and he worked with Helmar Schlecht. So part of the thinking of this is, to me, Helmar Schlecht is the protege of Max Warburg. And I pin them together, working in the Reichsbank together. Schlecht was in New York, before that, and his best friend, who was Montague Norman with the Bank of England, he had worked at like Brown and Shipley in New York, and his dad. So they're all connected, but you have to remember Max Warburg ran German intelligence during World War I, while his brother Paul Warburg has William Wiseman working for him, who's training, Stevenson and Julius Klein, and this whole network is coming out of this Warburg. Kuhn and Loeb is the name of the bank that they're most associated with, and that later was merged into Lehman Brothers under Pete Peterson, who was with your buddy George Shultz doing the gold, getting off the gold standard, creating the petrodollar. And then he merged Kuhn and Loeb and Lehman Brothers, and then later started Blackstone, which then he got Larry Fink from First Boston, and then they made BlackRock out of that.
Wow.
So that's kind of the connection, is that they're all together. And Pete Peterson was also on the chair. They did the chair. I forget the name of the thing. It was in 71 or 72, but they did all of the like charitable giving foundation. It was all when they did like the Safari Club, the BCCI Bank. Like, they were organizing all this stuff. And again, this is Casey, this is Kissinger, this is Ted Shackley doing the operational end. You were talking about Ed Wilson. He's working for Task Force 157, doing Kissinger's secret communications when he's going into China. So it's like all these characters together is who I see Warburg. I mean, Eric Warburg, who founded Warburg Pincus, is the son of Max. And then, you had James Warburg, that was William Donovan's assistant and ran the war information during World War II.
Oh, no.
In Europe. Yeah. So,
oh, no.
Yeah, because the thing is, Donovan was, we've talked about him before. He's Buffalo. Yeah. He's got the Goodyear background. He married the heiress. He, was a law student with FDR at Columbia, and his teacher was was from became the Supreme Court Chief Justice.
Frankfurter, right?
Not Frankfurter.
Oh,
It was
Brandeis?
it was
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm blanking on his name.
Was it
He
black?
was his brother was the president of Purdue that died. He was the Sullivan and Cromwell lawyer. He would have been the mentor to John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles. He was God, why can't I think of his name? He was Supreme Court Justice. I mean, he was the Chief Justice of. He was the dean of Columbia's law school. God, I can't think of his name. But anyway, they were all together. And then like I think of what you talked about with Donovan, fighting with MacArthur over the Pacific Theater's intelligence. And then Donovan's other assistant is the Duncan Lee, who's the Verona Papers and was AIG's chief counsel and set up the Flying Tigers and with Chiang Kai-shek and all that stuff. That was Duncan Lee, who was a secretary for Donovan in the Pacific Theater. So that's why like all those, it's why the characters, the secret team is hard because you were, you're focusing a lot on when Kennedy comes in after the 60 election and comparing it to the group from 52 with Eisenhower and his group. And there's so much crossover because like in 52, you had Engine Charlie Wilson was Secretary of Defense. That was the chairman of General Motors. And then in 60, Kennedy brings in McNamara, who, was president of Ford Motor Company and was a whiz kid. And he lived in Ann Arbor and lived, right on, Forest Hills Cemetery. And, he was a Ann Arbor Ford person before he moved to Washington. So that always.
I learned something about McNamara that I didn't know before recently. You might be interested in this. The firebombing of Tokyo, General Curtis LeMay, Robert McNamara was on his staff doing, mathematical, sorting things out for where the bombs go and how many bombs and all of that. It was McNamara working for Curtis LeMay in World War II. And if that doesn't tell you, something about McNamara that we never knew, it's that he was completely sold on this blanket bombing warfare campaign.
Wow.
When he was in World War II doing it to the Japanese. So when it came time in Vietnam to do the same thing to the Vietnamese, it was easy for him. It was a no-brainer. But then after it started in 1967, when the big Pentagon protest happened, the first one, he had a breakdown of his, he just had a conscientious and logical breakdown, and he realized that this war was not going to be won, and that the bombing wasn't make a damn bit of difference, and it just killed him psychologically. And so it's a real moral tale that we can share with people that if don't go down that road. Don't be one of those people that calculates everything with computers and whatever the computer says is the right thing to do. No, you've got to have a broader human existence in your brain that you can have all of the facets of humanity that make your decisions, and not just what a very sophisticated computer system tells you
Right.
to do. And that's a powerful message, to see somebody of McNamara's stature to just be broken like that because of that very, very serious error in human activity.
Wow. Well, to get back to the question that was at hand, I like Caravaggio's next comment about the vying factions, that I think that is exactly what David is describing, is that you have all of the players who have their different affiliations, who are the powerful vying for the top, for the throne.
Which is really the bottom when it comes to humanity. You know,
That's a good point.
Because you end up
Yes.
being the worst of the worst of the worst.
Yes.
And that's who wins this stupid Game of Thrones.
Yes, exactly.
And so, but that's because we have allowed the rules to favor the people that are treacherous, you know, like the Mossad's motto, we will win by deception. And they do, you know, and so like, what kind of world do they want to live in, where everybody stabs each other in the back until there's nobody left? That's what I don't want to live in.
What kind of person thinks that's okay? That's what blows my mind, is that there are people out there who are happy to embrace that ideology.
Yeah, because they have somehow just the part of our brains that enables us to connect with spiritual things, and the concept that perhaps there's more in the universe than has been dreamt of in my laboratory. The fact that we are just little bitty people in a very big universe, and we don't have a clue as to the big picture. But no, they decide, you know, do as thou wilt, the teaching of the famous Aleister Crowley, about whom David can tell us more, because Aleister Crowley went to Detroit to get some mushrooms.
David, what is your co-host's name?
My co-host's name is Bo, and he wandered in, and he's doing well. He's recovering, and he's getting a haircut Monday, so he's a little shaggy, but he's been great. And yeah, so he's in the part of the interview, or part of the show.
Well, I think that, and what he represents is the compassion that we all need to have for each other, and not this disconnect for other beings, because there are no sweeter, more compassionate beings than dogs, as far as I'm concerned.
They're Bo, like many dogs, is, you know, always happy to see you, and, you know, good spirited, and, you know, cheers you up. So he's great. And you know, he's had some health problems recently, but he's doing much better. And so it's been really nice that he can get around, and so it's been nice. But I agree. I mean, as far as the, you know, rewarding the most nefarious, I mean, it just makes me think of kind of what we're talking about, the Rand Corporation Monte Carlo group that Andrew Marshall was a part of. And he's from Detroit. He's a Castech person. And the Monte Carlo is game theory and strategy. And, you know, I made a comment on your show maybe a month ago about the cutthroat cribbage that you talked about, or the prisoner's dilemma, you know, those models. And, you know, those, like, I feel like if you're doing a, you know, like a mock trial or a debate team or something, like, it's great to use all those techniques, but at the end of the day, you don't want to betray your family and friends and stuff like that. It's a terrible way. And that is the double cross system. That's the X2 system, is to, you know, double cross and screw people over, and, you know, use your, you know, immunities and, you know, covert activity to hide it, or not have it be auditable, or, you know, investigated. And it's, you know, so that's partly why I dig big rabbit holes, is so I have a lot of area around the dark spots to hopefully make it make sense. Some of the things make sense.
There you go.
I will be reading a section from our friend Anton Chaikin's new book, his second volume in Who We Are. And in response to what you're saying, you know, about the darkness and everything, I think that if we follow the narrative laid forth by Anton Chaikin, and then if you want to go earlier before that, then to H. Graham Lowry's book, How the Nation Was Won, which, you know, covers up to about 1750. But Anton Chaikin's second volume is going to be published very soon, and he's been kind enough to send me a preprint that I can help to spread the word with. So I'll plan to do that next week sometime. And that's just there is a real American story. There really is a "We Are the Good Guys" story. And it's the secret team that comes along and throws mud all over it so nobody can see it anymore. But it's still there. And, when you have a precious author like Anton Chaikin to put it together for you, and at his stage in life, I know it's a lot of work, but I want to support that. And I think the reason is that this American narrative is not a bad story. We are in fact at the apex of creating a nation where freedom can endure for individuals and they can pursue happiness. It's never been done in the world before. And to just let that whole story die out under the weight of modern media and bullshit history classes in high school is wrong. I can't do it. So yeah, that's an answer I think that we can do, is to study that narrative of who we really are, who we wanted to be, and who we hopefully can still have a chance to getting back on track.
That's going to be very interesting. I'm going to look forward to hearing that.
Yeah. Underdown's Under History. Yeah, well, that was a major tour de force on the Warburgs, David. My God. Now I've got to see this again, like you say, if I wherever you start, like I started in 1960 or 59 and move forward from there. But if you go back to 1913, there's tons of stuff you can start there and go forward, or you can go back further. And a lot of the intrigue around the Civil War has never been explained. And
Yeah.
just put August Belmont into a search engine and figure out who the hell he was, and then you'll start seeing how our country was being attacked by European, essentially British interests, and pride apart.
Right. And I think that, this is so important, especially right now, because there are so many people out there who are acting as if somebody like Elon Musk suddenly having all of this power because he bought his way into it is a new thing. And it's not new. And, Harley said this when Elon Musk got very involved in the Trump campaign. And you brought that up with Harley. He said, this has been going on forever. It's just now being done out in the open. And this is a perfect example. I mean, there are all of these players who are the players behind the scenes, who are pulling strings, who are exerting control in one way or another, who are mentoring each other, as David has pointed out. And that's been going on always.
Corky Goss, our good friend, math weaponized. There you go. I mean, it's the computerization of public policy, the computerization of warfare. That's math. It's all, using math to generate the answer. And I did have one more comment on that point, and that is, I listened to Jeffrey Sachs's presentation at the UN about a week and a half ago. Very fascinating presentation. I know you have a lot of thoughts about Jeffrey Sachs. Indeed, everyone should. But one of the things that he pointed out is that when you see how this game is being played, how things are being played out, you'll notice that all these game theories are studied, the Rand Corporation famously, but the Pentagon, DARPA, everybody studies these game theories. And the one that they're playing right now is the one where you never concede. You never ever concede a point to the other side. You never dignify their responses with any type of reasonable reply. You just completely keep forging ahead with your own position, no matter what. And that's, I think, the way that I feel when my social media friends are so hostile and unwilling to discuss anything, that this particular game theory is behind the way we are being treated. And talking about playing games, did you see all the Democrats with their, their little paddles and, say war crimes and, or, whatever. And then the commercial that somebody went around with a video camera and a wireless, one of those little bitty wireless handheld mics is supposed to be clipped onto your shirt, but every single Democratic, there was 22 of them they had a script there, and they read the script in their own way, and it's been multiplexed onto a video that you can see. Well, that's it. They're just playing games, and this is
Exactly.
the game.
And they're saying what they're told to say.
Yeah, because
Exactly.
they're all on script because it's a game.
Indeed.
And I just no. I mean, there's things like World War III at stake here.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I was thinking about that this morning, just listening to the news and, Putin and what he's insisting on. And
I think of characters like Jamie Raskin, who led the January 6th, and his dad was, an assistant for Mac Bundy.
Marcus Raskin.
Marcus Raskin was a McGeorge Bundy assistant in this secret team era under the Kennedy administration. And then he was also the person that worked with Daniel Ellsberg, who was a Rand Corp Monte Carlo alum.
But don't leave out that he was also a member of the American Communist Party.
See, those labels I don't latch into that much, because Bill Browder's the same thing. His grandpa was the president of the whole thing, and then he becomes the arch Putin nemesis with Hermitage Capital, and he founds it with the guy whose family buys United Fruit Company and burns up in a Monaco mansion or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, the whole communism thing is hard for me because of world anti-communist goals and the whackle. And that's, that was Willoughby that started that with Chiang Kai-shek. And then you have your China hands and Henry Luce and Claire Booth Luce and this whole, secret team kind of group coming in with this anti-communism. And I was ruined because as a kid, my anti-communism was Rocky IV, when Rocky fights Ivan Drago, the Russian boxer. That was kind of the end of the Soviet Union. So they're kind of a joke. They hadn't been in the Olympics in '84 when I was really little, but they were kind of out of the picture. And when the Reagan said tear the wall down, I was a little kid. It didn't mean that much. I didn't know the background of the Brandenburg Gate and all that stuff. But I just I never thought of the communism as this great threat. I just didn't live through that era. I had the hockey players that defected from Canada, and they were Russian Five and were winning Stanley Cups for the Red Wings, and I loved it. Everybody loved the Russian Five. They were nice guys. They were good in the community, and they had the story of being poor in Russia and having a American dream, and people love that here. So I don't know. I was never the whole anti-communism thing is for me specifically. I don't know if my whole generation, but the having Putin as sort of this communist figure when he's not really a communist after the fall. I mean, it's just like confusing. I don't know. It's I feel like that wargaming of that backstory didn't get hashed out as well as they should have done, and they left some gaping holes in the story. So I don't know.
Oh, there's so many things like that, I mean, I see my wonderful friends in Ireland. Ireland is just completely brainwashed by their media. They're for Palestine, but against Russia. So they are for Zelensky and Palestine.
Yeah.
And but
I know people like that. They
uh,
see it, they see those as two as parallel.
and I just see, that Zelensky and Israel are on the same side. So that's another one of those paradoxes. Let's take this quote from Brightmore. Good morning, Brightmore. Has Dave explored the connections between the Fords in the U.S. and Canada? Is Doug Ford a Ford? Is Doug Ford that guy that used to run around with his hair messed up and snorting cocaine?
I think so. I haven't looked at that Ford as much. I mean, Ford obviously has a major Canadian presence because Windsor, Ontario is just across the Detroit River. So we're very Canadian, and the shipping between Canada and Detroit is, I believe, the busiest international port in the world. And the sending the Ford to Halifax to Europe, and then Henry Ford setting up in Cork, Ireland originally, and then England. He did for Germany. He was involved in the Stalin 5-year plan as far as Albert Kahn, his architect that built a lot of the factories in America, also built them in Russia. So I've looked. I mean, like I've said, I mean, I've looked at the Ford family a lot for that. The other thing that I think is really important is the Horace Roland Gaither character, because it was at MIT. He was in the Rad Lab. He was number 2 after Lita Bridge, and then he helped the Ford Foundation write their charter, and then he also created the MITRE Corporation. He was one of the Rand Corporation founders. He started one of the first hedge funds with William Henry Draper, who was an old Dillon Reed person that was doing financing for during the Depression, basically, in Europe, was Draper. And then his son is Tim Draper, who's a Draper Jervison now, but he was that the Dillon Reed story, I think, is really important because Douglas Dillon is one of the cabinet members for JFK in '60. So when you bring in the Treasury Secretary, it is Douglas Dillon. So you do have Forrestal was a Dillon Reed person, and just to go back, Dillon Reed was the company that bought Dodge from after the Dodge brothers died before they sold it to Chrysler.
Okay, that ties that in.
And they also bought Page Detroit, which was the Harry Jewett that I talk about a lot, that bought the Lita Forest vacuum tube patents, and later started WJR radio station, which became the radio station of Father Charles Coughlin went on to. And then he was at the Shrine of the Little Flower in Royal Oak, Michigan, was where he was a priest. So that's why those specifics of the story are so important to me, those details.
Prester John, hello. Putin is extra strength neoliberal. Yeah, well, that's a good way to put, I guess I don't really know, but I'm thinking that he's kind of that way. He certainly does his financing with Rothschild's associated banking system, like everybody else in the liberal field does. But what do you guys think? Think of Putin as a neoliberal, or just a neoliberal with an army?
There you go, a neoliberal with an army. Yeah, I do. I think Putin is yes.
All right.
I think Helmar Schlecht worked for the Dresden Bank, and I think that Martis Waring, Putin's mentor, worked for Dresden Bank before he went to Rosneft and the Nord Stream, and then also the former Chancellor of Germany, what's his name, Schroeder, like the Schroeder Bank. He also is a former chancellor going to Rosneft now. So I don't know. To me, it seems like the same kind of group of Bank of International Settlement style interests that are involved. So I never saw, you know, the when Michael Caputo, the guy that Roger Stone works with, was at Gazprom Media, you know, building the story of Putin as a, you know, taekwondo and, you know, all these, you know, all these, you know, things to try to make the kind of American, kind of Steve Bannon type fan, you know, really think Putin's a cool guy. I never saw that. I don't know. I don't know if I wasn't paying attention, but, you know, the affair with the, you know, gymnasts and all that stuff, like, it just, I don't know. It didn't strike me as being like, you know, a reason why he couldn't be a good or a bad leader or whatever. Like, all the, you know, I don't know. It's, I see him as just a system type leader like the others, but of course the big difference is that he's presented by many as a Hitler style leader, where if you don't recognize that, then there's something wrong with you as far as your ability to analyze. If you can't recognize that the person is obviously so terrible and there's no counter argument to that at all. So it's just not a good, it's just not a good framework for, you know, getting to consensus about something.
Absolutely right. And it's such a great point for people that are, you know, that are the great MAGA crowd, the Trump folks, because they're so easily seduced into just, you know, it's the commies. And, you know, that idea of, you know, there's always an enemy is exactly what the secret team provides. They're there to make sure that there is an enemy, and you know, gradually, all the enemies will fold into the, you know, into the Borg, and then
Be assimilated. Yeah, but
assimilated.
you got to have an enemy in order to control the people, because you have to tell them what to be afraid of and you have to tell them who to hate.
SpaceX launched today to rescue the stranded ISS astronauts. Well, that's a big political thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, the Democrats must be horrified that Elon Musk is going to do something good.
Well, and make money on it too.
Well, yeah, because, you know, he already has money. So,
Right, but he seems to want more.
are you going to watch the launch, David?
I'm not a lunch watcher. I was a fourth grader when the Challenger blew up, and you know, we had the full you know, lead up into it with the teacher being the, you know, the astronaut and all that stuff. And I was one of the kids that cried in the gym when the thing blew up. It was awful. So I'm not a big NASA person. I've never you know, got into the, you know, sci-fi and all that stuff. I was really sad. I mean, that was so sad for me as a little kid. It was a very
That must have been
strong
very
memory.
scary.
It was terrible. I mean, we watched the whole school got together and we watched it in the gym, and I mean, it was just awful. It was really shocking and terrible. So,
well, now they were supposed to launch yesterday.
Yeah.
And I guess that got scrubbed, and so they're sending new astronauts up in this launch, and so they're going to try again today. And then while they're there, rescue the guys, and guys being gender neutral, who got stranded.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a question.
Yeah, that's
okay.
that's where I'm at too. I think, you know, and then they canceled the launch at the very last second yesterday, I think, or the day before. So they're going to try it again today. They had some technical issues.
I did see that from where we are, which I've never heard before, we might be able to see some of it actually, because the way it's going to launch, it'll be up in the sky going past the East Coast.
They're launching from Cape Canaveral.
Yes.
And usually they launch from Galveston. So that's why, you know, but that's amazing that it's going to come up right up the East Coast, and maybe we'll see it go by.
Yeah. What time is the launch? I'll have to look that up so that we can make a point to go out on our balcony. Because I watched the launch from Wallops one time.
Jerome Brown, hey, my intuition, and I hope I am not deceived, says that Putin is not a very bad man. For most of him being around, I go in and out, but always return to not disliking him too much at all. Well, I saw him tumbling on the Aikido mat with another athlete on a video yesterday. So he's back in let's be touchy-feely love Putin mode. But coming from Europe, I'm glad to hear that, because it seems that Europe is being terrified in that Putin is going to launch an invasion and take over Europe. And from where I sit, that's got to be the most absurd idea that they've pushed on anybody yet. But
Well, that's what we were told back in the 60s about the Vietnam War, is that the communist Chinese were going to take over all of Asia and then eventually move on to Europe. I mean, again, that whole going back to our generation of be afraid, be very afraid of the communists. That's what we've been told.
I also think of the Czechoslovakian coup, the 48 coup with Russia going in and creating a pretext for NATO, as being sort of something to look at as far as those talking points, as being one of the big sort of proof of concepts of the potential. But again, they're not communists anymore. They reorganized, so it's those backstories get a little bit conflicting if you're going up based off of sort of old World Anti-Communist League talking points. They don't quite sync.
Yeah, I think that was a Frank Wisner operation that they launched that Czechoslovakian thing. But
and then the niece of the president became the classmate of my mom in Bloomington, Indiana. That was where Ava moved to Bloomington, and they were 5-year-olds, and they were classmates and everything. So that's another reason why the Czechoslovakia stuff is so intriguing, because she grew up with them, and they never talked about Europe. They didn't talk about any of that stuff. I mean, they were just Midwestern girls growing up in Bloomington, Indiana. They didn't talk about any of those issues. And of course, that would have been a family that was so deeply affected, with Edward Bennis being the government in exile. They had the invasion by Hitler. They had the Bank of International Settlements took their gold reserves to start the Bank of International Settlements. And then Jan Masaryk, who was the protege of Edward Bennis, whose dad was came to Chicago in the teens. He ended up negotiating the arms deal with Israel in 48 for surplus from Czechoslovakia from World War II. And then he ends up being killed. What do they call it? Fenstering, where they throw you out the window. He was thrown out of the window of the palace in Prague. And, that's that. And to me, that's part of the beginning of the communist threat and the breakup of the World War II partnership with the Allies, where the Russians were our, partner against the Nazis. And then all of a sudden we have a Cold War where they're a greater risk than anybody. And again, I think the secret team was a big part of the operations, but also the public relations and marketing and, cover services of it too.
Russia's trying to protect his nation from corruption and put the nation on the gold standard, says Laura. The gold standard, very, very interesting thing. We're running out of time, so I'm going to scroll through. I didn't get through everybody today, but I think it was worth it to have some extended answers from David. And wow, it always blows my mind, David. Thank you so much. Let's see if we can pick up one or two more.
Can I add one little McNamara tidbit that I think is really interesting?
Sure.
When he lived in Ann Arbor, he would go to the Presbyterian Church. The first Presbyterian church in Ann Arbor is also the institution that invited Marina Oswald to become an English language student in Ann Arbor right after the assassination of JFK. Just saying, I don't know if that's related, but it was the same church in Ann Arbor.
Wow.
Very interesting.
Indeed.
Well, folks, it's noon, and I think we're going to call it right here. Boy, it's been fun and
flew by.
Yes. Thanks, Marcia.
Thank you. Happy Pie Day to everybody too.
Yeah.
What
Happy.
day? Oh, happy Friday. Yeah.
Oh, Pie Day.
Oh, Pie Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, today is Pie Day.
3.1415927.
More than I could do.
What's next?
I
My
don't know.
nephew, yeah, my nephew will get me on that one. That is his wheelhouse of humor. So he'll get me.
I'm just trying to decide what kind of pie you want.
For me, oh my gosh, I'm across the board, but I mean the most common are just like the apple pie, I would say. But we're
I
our
could go with apple pie.
Okay.
the chess pie is more of the Kentucky. If you're feeling more southern, like a sugar chess pie, that was a Nettie Ethel
No sugar.
classic. It's
Yeah,
so
everything
sweet.
we do here has
It's-
all the sugar and oil and refined flour removed. So
It's like a pecan pie with no pecans. It's just like a sugar bomb. So
I've heard. Yeah, I know
No.
what you're talking about.
Yeah.
All right.
No
Well,
more sugar bombs for me.
we'll see what kind of a fruity thing we can do.
Sounds lovely.
so many good choices. So hopefully everybody has a good pie and has a nice celebration.
All right, very good. You know, I've just dug up some new stuff on the secret team in Saxa, and I'll be sharing that on Monday morning at 11. So stay tuned, and we'll talk to you then. Bye, everybody.